for joining. I can stand up. So, my name's Tracy Kwan. I'm an editor and contributor to The Left Voice, which is an online media project. We just came out with our first print edition like a few days ago. This is our kind of debut of Left Voice in print. And you guys should introduce yourself as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Vladek. I'm from Berlin. I'm from the Revolutionary Internationalist Organization and an editor of the website Casa Gegen Casa. Yeah, which is a part of the International Trotskyist faction and associated with the Fleet of Argentina.
I'm Juan. I'm a member of the PTS. I've been organizing for the PTS in Argentina, which is one of the parties conforming the FIT, the Left Workers Front, for a few years. And I recently moved to the US and I'm collaborating, organizing our website, Left Voice, this new project that we have. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of what I saw with my own eyes. I visited Argentina in October, and it was the week before the general elections, and it was my first time seeing any example or any mobilization of the FIT. I'd heard a little bit about it before I arrived in Argentina. It was during a break during nursing school. And one of the first events that Juan and other comrades took me to was we drove an hour out in the night to an industrial area, the northern industrial zone of Buenos Aires, which is about an hour north of Buenos Aires, the capital city. And I was like, where are we going? We ended up in this in front of this huge warehouse. And entering, it was a place full of barbecue smoke and families, all industrial workers. Obviously there was asado, the main thing. People, drinking beer, wine together, bleachers stacked with university students who were there. And it was about 900 to 1,000 workers and workers' families who work in the industrial zone. So auto workers, folks who work for Kraft Foods, Lear, which is an auto factory, Marigraph, which is a print factory that was occupied a year and a half ago by workers. Many workers who had been involved in the struggles at their shop floor, as well as roadblocks against the Kirchner's government, which was replaced recently by Macri. And I was like, okay, this is a little different in scale from what I had experienced in the US. And listening to the speeches, it was worker after worker talking about their specific struggles to take over the shop floor committee in their factory. So fighting against the retaliation from the boss and the union bureaucracy. Workers who had fought were fired in the process of fighting for better conditions and then fought to get rehired. And it was just an hour and a half of speeches by people who had been at the front of these struggles the last 5 years, since 2009 with Kraft. And then, apparently this was a Left and Workers' Front rally, right? But it was very much denouncing the policies of, oh, is it locked? Oh, yeah.
It's not.
Thanks. Yeah. Hey. And toward the end, we saw Nicolás del Caño, who was the presidential candidate of the Left and Workers' Front, who himself was a precarious worker for many years, and spoke about receiving the salary of a teacher, and echoing, the demands of the workers, but also advancing a very clear, our solution is revolutionary socialism, and that elections are at the service of the mobilization of workers. And what you guys are doing we join you to block the roads. And for me, I was like, this is, where is this coming from? You know, like how did you, it wasn't just offering some chorizo that people like pack the room and somehow relate to this electoral front. And then, you know, at the end of the rally, all the workers who were on stage who had spoken about their particular struggles were also running in the elections. Like we are ourselves running as workers, and we can lead society through this example. And of course, we ended like everyone stood up and sang the International. So it was a really great experience. So for me, what I was left with was a lot of questions. To what extent can this phenomenon, the growth of this clearly like this electoral phenomenon that's really rooted in the working class and worker struggles, and how can that inform what we're doing in the U.S. Right now, we're obviously like in the thick of presidential elections, and a lot of the discussions of how the left should take a position for or against Bernie, etc. And what is the correct strategy vis-a-vis elections in the United States? And also, like, where did this come from? Who are the parties that make up the Left and Workers' Front? What do they do every day? What do they do 364 days a year when it's not time to vote? So, with that said, I'll pass it to Juan and he can tell us a little more about, answer all my questions, basically.
I have my notebook over there.
Sure.
So our idea is to try to convey what we can transmit from the Left and Workers' Front and answer all the questions. We see that the experience of this electoral front in Argentina, this radical left electoral front, hasn't caught the attention of many liberal and progressive media, even left or revolutionary left media, that are very keen on portraying Syriza, Podemos, and many other experiences that are also successful. But so it's not the case with the left front in Argentina. So it would be good if we're going to leave a space for Q&A later, and but I'm going to try to explain as much as possible and to convey all that is needed to understand this phenomenon. And in that sense, trying not to bore you, I'm going to give a very quick snapshot of the political situation in Argentina and how different forces come into play in this general landscape. If we talk about Argentina, we have to know that there's long-term tradition of radical left. It's one of the places where Trotskism took root during the 20th century. From the first years of the 20th century, there was a huge immigration from Eastern Europe, from Italy, and from Russia. So there was, from the beginning of 20th century, a lot of anarchists, communists, socialists that made up the working class in Argentina. So the working class is combative in Argentina. It has been always combative throughout the 20th century. We have to also know that in Argentina there's a big, very important party, the Peronism. I'm sure most of you have heard of it, have read. Many of you must be very knowledgeable of it. It's an experience that, or a phenomenon that has been studied abroad. So to understand Peronism, we have to know that it was a populist party founded by Perón in the 40s and 50s. Perón himself came from the ranks of the military, but he implemented a lot of policies favorable to the working class, and in that sense, from the beginning, it was the party that the working class would vote, and the majority of the working class would vote Peronism and would recognize themselves as Peronists, and also the way the unions have been crafted, have been the framework, legal framework of the unions in Argentina, has been a product of Peronist government, the government of Peron himself. So it made it a way that it's very dependent, very entrenched with the state, very incorporated to the state. The state has a lot to do with dues, collecting, and distributing money, and the legality to win union representation. And that means that as a result, the unionist leadership, the union leadership, and the bureaucracy has been Peronist throughout the second half of the century, so the 20th century. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The labor movement has been advocating to vote Peronist parties for decades. Then we also have to know that in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, there was a huge, a big upheaval, working class upheaval, with many revolutionary forces rooted in the working class, and with controlling the comisiones internas, which is similar to the shop floor committees here. And that was a very, very important rank and file movement, which gained expression as a political movement. There was also strong guerrilla movements, and all this left-wing militancy, revolutionary militancy of the 70s, was crushed by the Peronist government. When Peron came back in 1973, he took office in 74, and when he died, his wife, Isabel Martínez de Perón, she implemented the first state terror against the left, which was called AAA, Alianza Anticomunista Argentina, anti-communist Argentine alliance. So, and there were shock troops that would just hunt down and shot and murder work activists of the working class, and especially left-wing militants. That was followed by a military dictatorship, which lasted 6 years, from 1976 to 1982. All of the working class militancy and the left-wing parties, there were 30,000 people, how do you say, abducted and disappeared and murdered. And after that, there was neoliberalism came, right? The 80s and 90s. So that is important to have a grasp of how the attacks of the ruling class, whether by direct physical attacks, physically eliminating the vanguard of the working class, the more conscious sectors of the working class, the most revolutionary and radical sectors. That was a central role, but also neoliberalism through layoffs, austerity policies, privatizations also was central in undermining the power of the working class in Argentina. So we reached a point in 2001, which after many years of austerity policies, privatizations, policies against the working class and the poor, the unemployment rose to over 25%. There was a very, very important economic crisis, which led to a political crisis. And in December of 2001, we have a turning point in which there's two days in which lootings started to happen, huge mobilizations, huge repression. In those 2 days, 37 people were killed by the forces of the state. nationwide. So, and that was a turning point. There was a movement that started to happen before, but also exploded in a good sense. Like it was really spread out after that, which is the piqueteros movement. It's you're probably familiar with that, but for those who are not, it was an organizations, many organizations of unemployed workers who organized around social programs, demanding for more programs, more food stamp, similar to food stamps. We call it bolsones de comida. Different grievances, and the method they used was roadblocks, and that's what piquete means in Spanish, is roadblock. So that was the leverage, that was the power as unemployed workers they found to advance their demands, to disrupt the economy, to demand what they were asking for. That was huge. That was really big. And there was another movement that we talked a little bit about yesterday in another panel, the factory occupations movement. Many of the factories that were closed down were taken over by the workers and started to be run by them. It was a very widespread and important movement that was featured in many documentaries. From 2001 onwards, we see an economic boom in all the region in Latin America. It's that economic boom had roots mainly in the demand of raw materials from China. It was a general economic bonanza that which many countries in the region profited from. And it was also in Argentina, in 2003 specifically, the beginning of the Kirchnerist government, which you might be more familiar with. We have to remember that Kirchner took office with only 23% of the vote. That's very, very low in Argentina. In Argentina, the vote is compulsory. Everyone has to go and vote. And so it's not like here that the turnout is 50% or lower. So he took office with a very low popular support, and he had to have policies to broaden his popular base, his social base. Among those policies, the central one was the release. They implemented many social programs, what became to be known as conditional cash transfers, which is money given to people who can prove they are poor in exchange for sending their kids to school or health checks. It was a very, very widespread kind of policy that happened in all Latin America, encouraged by the World Bank. But that was an emergency program that gave relief to a huge portion of the population. Along with that, to win the hearts of the middle class, or to co-opt also many human rights organizations, they had very strong discourse on human rights. They brought charges to the higher ranks of the military dictatorship. This one we were talking about between 76 and 82. Of course, leaving many things without change. Like they didn't release all the secret archives of the police and the military of that time, which would have been very, very important to solve many of the cases. They didn't bring charges over lower ranks of the military. But again, it was a very publicized and very important policy, which allowed them to co-opt many of the human rights organizations. the Piqueteros movement was also co-opted through all these social programs, conditional cash transfers. So from 2003 on, many, and this is important to have in mind, many of the popular left or center left and popular organizations, which probably didn't have a clear political delimitation, were co-opted by the Kirchner. And at the same time, there was a very considerable decrease in unemployment. So people were coming back to the factories. People were going back to have jobs. And the working class gained with this economic growth many conquests that will have an effect in the relation of forces with the government and with the bosses that are affecting now the situation in Argentina. So that's the general situation. Now we are seeing the beginning of a new economic crisis. We see that the price of the raw materials has sunk, and there's not as much demand, and factories are closing, and also this economic downturn has a political reflection in the shift to the right in many governments in the region, as we see the impeachment in Brazil, we see the attempt to topple Maduro in Venezuela, regardless of the differences that we have with this government, but it's clearly a shift to the right. And it was definitely a shift to the right, the election that gave Macri the government in Argentina. Macri is a totally right-wing politician, a businessman all his life. So that's the situation now, and the relation of forces between the working class, the union bureaucracy, and the government and the political forces is very important to understand the situation now. I was maybe a little bit long on this, but it's important to understand all the rest. So more specifically about the left front, the left front was formed in 2011. It was initially a defensive tactic. Why a defensive tactic? Because the Kirchners, with the popular support that they had, they implemented an electoral reform which required for political parties to gather hundreds of thousands of signatures, and made the requirements to be legally to win the right to run in an election very, very difficult for all political parties. There were many small political parties that could not run in elections because of this. Facing that restrictions, the forces of the revolutionary left in Argentina, from this front, which was called the Left and Workers Front, in Spanish is Frente de Izquierda y los Trabajadores, FIT, and it's basically formed by three major organizations. PTS, Partido de los Trabajadores Socialistas, which means Socialist Workers Party, but does have nothing to do with SWP in here or in Great Britain. The Izquierda Socialista, Socialist Left, and PO, Partido Obrero, Workers Party. These three organizations are Trotskyist organizations, different traditions within the Trotskyist movement. The PO is a Pabloide organization. Izquierda Socialista is a Morenoide organization. For people who are not familiar, maybe this is all confusing, but for people who are familiar with this, will know what we're talking about. And the PTS broke with the Morenoide tradition in 1987, and as party, I am a member of the PTS, and we recover much of the legacy of Nahuel Moreno, which was an Argentine Trotskyist, but we also take issue with many of his elaborations. So we don't consider ourselves a Morenoite anymore. So this is a front that outright um, has a stance against capitalism, and this is a front that has no like watered down program. It's important to see how um, a radical, a revolutionary left in a front like this um, had such a big success in elections. In 2013 we had more than a million votes. In 2015 again more than a million votes. Even if it was presidential elections. In presidential elections, people tend to be more conservative. In midterm elections, it's usually it tends to be more to the left because people have this idea of, well, it's good to have a radical left in Congress, but probably not very fit for being president or something like that. So we had more than 3% of the vote. The voting population of Argentina is 40 million people. So a million votes is more than 3% of the electorate. And this was without watering down. Because I see some 40 million people, but not all of them vote because the vote is over 16 and there's an age over which you are not required to vote. You're not. It's not compulsory vote. I don't know exactly what age that is, but anyway. So in the last election, 2015, we were the left. All the reformist left parties and popular left not disappeared, but were running behind the left front, and that's a very interesting thing to see because usually we think about a reformist left as something more palatable or something that can gain more votes, and maybe we shouldn't say revolution in our program, or we shouldn't be outright anti-capitalist, or how about joining forces with some other currents, and okay, with this current, if we want to go in front with this current, we cannot say we are outright against capitalism or so watering down the program to form a front has been the shortcoming, the drawback of many electoral experiences that we've seen in the past and we see today. That was not the case of the left front, and that's something very interesting, how this electoral coalition could really gain so much support without watering down the program. If you see our electoral platform, it states clearly that for solving the problems of the poor and the working class, it can be within the margins of capitalism, within the framework of capitalism, that it will need to be a social revolution to attain that. We even advance transitional demands, such as the sliding scale of wages, the sliding scale of working hours. One of the most popular demands was that every elected official should earn the same as any worker. We took the example of the teacher, and we said every member of parliament, every congressman, every elected official should earn the same amount as a teacher. And that was revolting. That was really for the business as usual of or the politics that is people are usually received from the media. It's like it was really rare to see, and that was why it was really popular. And actually, our congressman, we won 5 seats in national congress, and the members of the front, the PTS particularly, win or earn the amount and like the equal amount of a teacher, and then donate all the rest of their how do you say, the salary to working struggles, popular causes, solidarity funds for workers who are on strike, etc., etc. So, and that is in action what we advanced, and it's not a like populist, just a populist gesture or something. We track this demand to the traditions of the Paris Commune, in which everyone was equal, which every elected official was recallable. So, and everyone earned the same as a worker. That's how we think society should be run. So that brings us to the question of what's the like the name of the panel. What's the role of elections for revolutionaries? So it's, of course, probably most of you read Marx and Engels and how elections are a gauge of, I don't know the phrase in English, but it's a thermometer, a gauge of the consciousness of the working class, and so it's only that as a measure of how evolved is the subjectivity, the consciousness of the working class, how well organized they are, or can we as revolutionaries take advantage of those fault lines, those opportunities that the bourgeois democracy gives as a concession to popular forces, to strikes, to roadblocks, to what was 2001 in Argentina, to social movements, etc. So we understand the seats in Congress, we understand the places that we have won as stages where we can spread, where we can give a voice to the militant workers, give a voice to give a speaker to the struggles going on the streets, and be basically a megaphone for those ideas, megaphone for the working class, for our ideas of what a just society should be, how a just society should be, for socialist ideas, basically. This cannot be only done from the Congress, from the Parliament. This is subordinated. This is this has to be in the service of working class struggles, and it has to be backed by mobilizations in the streets. Like Vladek, my friend here, is going to talk about Syriza, and Syriza is a great example of how they really wanted to people on the streets not to march anymore, not to demonstrate, to calm down, and that's a big problem. If you don't have the pressure from pressure on the streets from working class movements, from the unions, from the poor, from the people who are oppressed and exploited, then it's going to be difficult to gain any reform. And it's not, of course, it's not that we think that through reforms in parliament we're going to slowly reach a point in which, oh, we're in socialism. That doesn't happen. That has never happened in history. The bourgeoisie defends with tooth and nails everything they have, the means of production. That's not going to happen slowly in a transition, smooth transition. But yes, the seats in Congress can help advance all these struggles that give the working class a better position in winning their demands in the road for socialism as a strategy. So that's so even if we put a lot of effort on winning the right to run in elections, it was a huge, like, although that year, 2013, 2011, it was huge militant work. Like, you can imagine, it was 24 hours a day, looking for signatures, looking for what we call avales. So, but it paid off, and it paid off because after that we won, for example, the right to have ads, video ads on national TV. We're going to show some of them. We have English subtitles so that you can see how these demands were expressed in that campaign. But it also played out because it was a very important way to bridge the militant work at the workplace. That is a central piece of our organizing, and the political goal and the political expression of the working class in a working class anti-capitalist party. So hundreds of thousands of workers who were close to us, who sympathized with our ideas, were eager to run on our ticket, on the ticket of the Left and Workers' Front. And they were probably contexts of union work. They were part of our more radical caucus in different trades, in different unions, not necessarily party members. And that was very interesting how, for example, we talked yesterday about Madigraf. Some of you were in that panel. This is a factory of 400 workers, a print shop that was taken over by the workers, and now it's being run by workers. We have some notebooks printed by them. And among those 400 workers, there were 200 workers who were on a ticket with the PTS, with the Left and Workers' Front. That's incredible. That's amazing. It's the consciousness of a worker that doesn't only want to have control of what he's producing and having a co-op or something. He wants to go beyond the gates of the factory and wants to bring this example to the whole society and say, hey, we can run a factory, we can run the society. Why not? Why not? This kind of feedback between organizing at the workplace, doing union work, being really focused on structure of the structures, the workplaces, factories, schools, hospitals, and the electoral politics is something that it was new to us, to the PTS, because we are a relatively new force. We have 25 years as a political force since we broke with Morenoians. So we've been a relatively small group, and then it was not all of a sudden. It was militant work and persistency and patient work. But at some point, we saw our candidate on air TV on a presidential debate with the other 3 presidential candidates, which is something. It was something crazy for us. Our candidates every day in the newspapers, in the mainstream media, giving opinions about this, about that, about. So yeah, it was totally a turning point for us. So yeah, I'm going to show you a few ads that we produced. You can check them at our website, Left Voice, too. Yeah.
A mí no me la tienes que contar. Cuando no te dejan tener un trabajo estable, cuando no te garantizan ningún tipo de derecho, te precarizan la vida. No a los despidos. Pase a planta de todo por un salario que cubra la canasta familiar. Para fortalecer la lucha por tu futuro, danos tu voto.
El caño presidente. Bergman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
This is really good. The union bureaucracy.
Sí, hay que ajustar, vamos a garantizar el orden de la empresa. Sí. Las demás listas tienen compromiso con los sindicalistas traidores. Solo el Frente de Izquierda lucha por recuperar los sindicatos para los trabajadores.
El caño presidente. Bergman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Hay 6 listas, pero solo la nuestra defiende en serio los derechos de las mujeres.
Proponemos un plan de emergencia contra la violencia hacia las mujeres.
Y el derecho al aborto seguro y gratuito.
Para fortalecer esta lucha, danos tu voto.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Out of the 6 tickets, we were the only force that proposed safe and free abortion. That's something telling about.
La Bardi contaminó las aguas de San Juan con el derrame de cianuro. La mega minería es una amenaza para todo el país.
Scioli, Macri y Massa defienden estas multinacionales. Digamos no a la mega minería contaminante.
Para fortalecer esta lucha, danos tu voto.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Hay 6 listas, pero solo la nuestra se planta ante la impunidad del poder.
Aunque no le guste a mucho lo que nosotros hacemos, que empezamos a la clase trabajadora, a la juventud, en sus movilizaciones, tenemos el derecho legítimo, aunque no le guste, nosotros lo vamos a seguir haciendo.
Necesitamos tu apoyo para dar fuerza a la lucha de los trabajadores, las mujeres y la juventud, en el Congreso y en las calles.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Y sí, lo va a ejecutar, es pedir, pero quédate tranquilo, que con cualquiera de los 3 vamos a seguir haciendo negocio. Los empresarios tienen sus candidatos.
Nosotros, la izquierda, vamos a plantarnos en defensa del salario, contra los despidos y el trabajo precario.
Con la lucha y tu voto, lo vamos a lograr.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Bueno, para constructoras, hacemos torres, barrios privados, negocios con el Estado. Ahí está la plata.
A eso ellos le llaman inversión inmobiliaria.
Proponemos un plan de viviendas para las 3 millones de familias que viven en forma precaria, financiado con impuestos a las grandes fortunas.
Con la lucha y con tu voto, lo vamos a lograr.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
¿Viste el flan del Tucumán que está? Sí, evidentemente la corrupción, miembro vudú. ¿Y qué podés esperar? Son todos iguales.
Que los diputados y funcionarios políticos sean revocables y cobren como una maestra.
Con la lucha y con tu voto, lo vamos a lograr.
Del cambio presidente, Redman Vice, lista 137, frente de izquierda.
Okay, that's it. Yeah. Let me show you also every March 24th in Argentina, there's the biggest march of the year because it's the anniversary of the military coup in 1976. So there's this huge mobilization where all popular forces, left groups, human rights groups, left organizations march, and this is the, how do you say, the column, or the of the contingent. Thanks. The contingent of the PTS only, part of the Frente de Izquierda, but at this point the biggest force in the front. That's it, right? Yeah. So I'm living there. I live Vladek now, and probably then Tracy. We'll see if we go to the Q&A. Sorry, Vladek. I just now that I see La Izquierda Diario.com, just wanted to say a few things about that. We the electoral the left and the workers' front was a turning point for us, of course, and the success we gained and the visibility we gained in the 2015 elections was incredible and also a tipping point. But in 2014, we made a really important decision, which was releasing a daily online newspaper. And it's not all political parties, of course, have a press. This was meant to be a newspaper where you could read all the news. You could read all the news that are important for the working class, basically, and with a working class perspective. So you would have 50, 70 news every day, touching on politics, national politics, economy, international politics, and that was La Izquierda Diario. It was also a huge militant effort, and the same as with the electoral legality and all that process, there was a point in which we would see each other and say, "Is this really worth it? Like, we are so stressed and so much busy with this this undertaking, this idea, this project." But it really paid off. Now we can see the La Izquierda Diario alone in Argentina has I noted here, over 2 million visits per month. It's by far the biggest progressive newspaper from a left perspective in Argentina. It has sprawled to other countries. Now we have outlets in, apart from Argentina, in Brazil, which has 300,000 visits per month. It's also the biggest left news outlet in Brazil. In France, it's called Revolutionaries. It has 65,000 visits per month. So, and it's also the latest New Left review in its editorial. It cites, it mentions this website as the website that has played the biggest role in portraying the movement of the students against the labor reform. So that's how central it became to be. And now it's an international news network of which Left Voice is part of, and we're proud of that. And we use a lot of the information articles that are in other outlets to give a first-hand report of what's going on in France, what's going on in Argentina, what's going on in Brazil. So that's an asset, a big asset that we have, and of course, it's always hard to translate, edit. We are still a very small group here in the U.S., and we would totally appreciate any collaboration from people who are willing to help. But yeah, now I give to the word to Vladek. Thanks.
Yeah, was anyone here at the plenary on Friday, the first evening plenary? There was Chris Hedges, the journalist, was speaking there. He was calling for an independent, new third party to represent the left. And he used an example. He said this would take a long time, that we need a long-term perspective to build this up. And he used an example that the Greek left party, Syriza, started at only 4% of the vote and then was able to win a majority. And I don't know, if I was the only one, I choked a bit at that. And is that really the best example for the kind of political party we need? And yeah, what I'd like to do now is compare and contrast a bit the left party Syriza with the left front in Argentina. There's a comrade from the ISO, the journalist Todd Chrétien, I think. Chrétien, yeah, from the West Coast. And he's done a lot to make the Argentinian experience known to a English-speaking audience. He's done a number of interviews and articles. But I should also criticize that in several of his articles, he's put the FIT, the Workers' Left Front in Argentina, in one category with experiences like Syriza in Greece or Podemos in the Spanish state, all as kind of expressions of a new left or as new left parties. And on the one hand, it is true that Syriza and Podemos and the FIT are all new, only a few years old. They're left, and they got lots of votes. But I think that's really where the similarities end. And my thesis is that the Workers' Left Front of Argentina is actually an opposite project of what Syriza and Podemos represent. I'd like to explain that on four different levels, four examples where they seem to be opposed projects to me. So one just on a basic programmatic level, what do these parties want? What does Syriza want? What does Podemos want? And what does the Workers' Left Front of Argentina want? In the case of Syriza, their former economic minister, Yanis Varoufakis, he, he's not a Marxist. He's more of a Keynesian, and his idea about the state of the Greek economy was that the economic crisis in Greece was so profound that workers and capitalists, most capitalists, he said, had a common interest in getting the economy to recover. He said there was no possibility for class struggle until the Greek economy could grow again. And that is a statement which is consistent with the general program of Syriza, which is consistent with the program of Keynesianism that says that the job of the left is to find some kind of solution which is compatible to the interests of both workers and capitalists. And the difficulty, if not impossibility, of this idea, I think, is proven quite eloquently by the example of Syriza in the last years that they've been in power. The FIT, in contrast, one of their central slogans is using one sentence to express the very opposite idea. This idea that the capitalists must pay for their own crisis, and yeah. The FIT, one of their central demands, in contrast to Syriza, is the need to tax and expropriate the capitalists in order to solve the crisis, in order to find a solution to the crisis which is in the interest of working people. A second, and then that reminds me as well that also the relationship to imperialism is very different as a result of this. That while Syriza, their entire program for solving the economic crisis in Greece was based on a plan for negotiating with Schäuble and with other representatives of imperialism, whereas the FIT talks about the need to break with imperialism and to liberate the Latin American continent with the Socialist Federation. Another level where there's really profound differences is the question of government. Syriza came to power with the project of a left government. And what they meant by that was a government of a left party based on a parliamentary majority and governing via the capitalist state, using the institutions of the capitalist state. And as you all know, when Syriza did win the elections, their very first, within a few hours, their very first act as the winning party was to form a coalition with the right-wing nationalist independent Greeks, ANEL, and they actually gave an ANEL representative the defense ministry as a sign, as a symbolic reassurance to the Greek bourgeoisie that the armed forces would remain in the hands of the xenophobic and insane right. Reassurances that at the end of the day weren't really necessary, but which were still symbolically important. So, FIT, in contrast, talks about a workers' government, and there's been debate on the left over the last few years. Is this just a question of terminology? You know, left government, workers' government, pretty much the same. Maybe left is a bit more palatable. It's just a nicer way of saying workers' government. But what the FIT is talking about, what they make very explicit, is a workers' government is one that's not based on the capitalist state, which is not based on the police, the army, the institutions of the capitalist state, but rather based on workers' self-organization. Workers' government is one which has the goal of superseding and destroying the bourgeois state. And I think this shows as well that people who thought that the slogan of a left government in Greece would somehow represent a transition to socialism, to a workers' government, it was shown that wasn't a realistic perspective, and the FIT's idea of a radical independence from the bourgeois state and from its institutions and from all the parties of the bourgeoisie is really the only way to prevent a Syriza-style disaster. Yeah. A third difference I want to mention is the question of construction, is a question of what kind of party do workers need. I think, I don't know, I'm from Germany, as I mentioned before, and I know within Europe there are a lot of misunderstandings about the nature of Syriza and how it worked, what role it played. There's a feeling, Syriza got something like 2 million votes at its high point. It was very successful on the electoral level, and people assumed that that must be a result of must be an expression of a very broad support for Syriza amongst the working class and the youth. But what I know from my experiences in Greece and from comrades in Greece is that Syriza was actually never a very big party. If you look at the historical social democracy of Greece from the 1970s, PASOK had something like 250,000 members out of a population of less than 10 million. Syriza, in contrast, even just counting the most basic paper members, people who signed up on the internet and never had any organic relationship with the party at all, Syriza never got up above about 30,000 members. And it was fundamentally a party that was it was an apparatus. It was a party that existed in an office, and it connected with its base, with its voters, not via organic structures, but fundamentally via the bourgeois media, via the capitalist media. And yeah. And so Syriza, if you, for example, ever went to demonstrations, never seemed like a very big party. The Greek Communist Party, which electorally was very weak, always had more members than Syriza and had a vastly larger presence at demonstrations. But even smaller alliances like the Antarcia, the alliance of the anti-capitalist left, which was always been quite weak electorally, but at every demonstration had a much larger contingent than Syriza did. And Syriza also in the struggles itself never played a role. You did have Syriza representatives going to different struggles and offering support, but always on a perspective of electoralism, always on a, when the Viome workers occupied their factory and began producing under workers' control, Syriza, which at the time was not in government, did show up. They did offer some verbal support, but their message was that the workers needed to elect a left Syriza government. That was going to solve their problems. They had no solutions they had no perspectives for the struggle beyond voting. And in fact, when Syriza did assume government, they provided no assistance of any kind to this. It was a complete dead end. And again, the FIT, by contrast, is based on a construction in the working class. What was really exciting, especially about the most recent election campaign, there was a real breakthrough there in terms of transforming fighters from the working class, from the youth, from the women's movement and the LGBTI movement, into politicians, in quote marks, I guess politicians in the good sense of the word. They're taking people who play a role in struggles in their workplaces and turn them into candidates. Having not just from a local perspective, but from a global perspective, presenting political answers. So it's this combination, really, that the FIT, the electoral success of the FIT is at the end of the day really an expression of an upsurge in working class struggles that started around 2009, 2010 in Argentina, and this is the electoral expression of parties that are fundamentally, their activity is fundamentally concentrated in the working class and the youth and in other oppressed groups. Right. And the last point I want to go on to is the question of democracy, our concept of democracy. And here I want to talk about Podemos a little bit more. Podemos, a very new grouping, one that has not been in a national government yet. And Podemos has a very strong democratic discourse, and they talk a lot about the possibilities of new technology for improving, for creating a more thorough democracy. They're very skilled at using Facebook and other social media. They talk about theories like liquid democracy, the possibility to, well, and it's an interesting idea at a purely theoretical level, the idea of creating democracy based on information technology and sharing information across from one place to another immediately. But in practice, what Podemos has expressed, the idea, for example, when Podemos has internal elections, anyone at all can participate. Anyone with an internet connection can voice their opinion about what Podemos should do. But that leads to a number of problems, the principal of which is, there are different opinions and different currents within Podemos. But if anyone is voting, then the person who has the best chances of winning such a public election is the person with the most popular Facebook page, is the person with the best access to TV shows, and that's inevitably the central leader of Podemos, Pablo Iglesias, who has won every such election by margins of 80, 90, 95%. And that's the other more fundamental problem with plebiscites like this is, of course, that when you ask mass of people a yes or no question, do you want this, yes or no? The real question is who decides, who decides what question is asked. That position is much more influential than the people who are actually answering the question. And so that leads to a situation where Pablo Iglesias and his co-thinkers within Podemos actually control 100% of the leading bodies of the party. There's not at a national level not even a single symbolic oppositionist within the party, and that's led to this very very bizarre situation where Podemos, which had such a democratic discourse, is probably one of the least democratic parties in the Spanish political system. Even the Conservative Party, you'll have someone opposed to the party leader in a relatively prominent position. You'll have debates between different tendencies in the leading body, and all that doesn't exist in Podemos. Right, and the FIT, in contrast, is generally based on an idea not of this kind of internet democracy, but an idea of democracy of struggle, an idea of workers' democracy, in which people struggle in assemblies, and not in a virtual capacity, but people who are on the streets, who are fighting, who are in their workplaces and faculties. They make decisions and implement them themselves, trying to supersede the division between voting and acting, but trying to create a democracy of people who are struggling. So that briefly, I think, is examples that show that this description of Syriza, Podemos, and the FIT as different expressions of new left is not really accurate. That in contrast, the FIT represents an alternative to Syriza and Podemos, and especially now where the left government model, where the neo-reformism of Syriza has so clearly showed its limits. Just yesterday in the news, Syriza agreed to a further 2 billion euros in cuts from the Greek government. Where this perspective, this is my first time at the Left Forum, but based on my experiences in Europe, I'm confident that 2 years ago Syriza was all the hype here.
1 year ago.
1 year ago even, okay, just before the betrayal came. So based on that, I think the FIT actually represents an alternative. That when we talk about uniting the left, the basic principles of the FIT, the idea of class independence, the idea of a workers' government, provide important ideas for the basis of how to unite the left. I think it's a shame that whenever we talk about the idea of uniting the left, there's almost this automatic idea that it has to be on a reformist basis. There's unity can only be the result of lowest common denominator stuff, where we say, well, we're for this or that reform, and anything revolutionary have to come later. And I think what makes the FIT so exciting, and probably is a factor as well why it's not as present in left-wing debates as Syriza and Podemos have been. But there you have a united revolutionary left, which is winning, over 4 years, has gotten more than 1 million votes, has parliamentary representation, and I think it's a model that left organizations in different places in different countries can follow. Just to close with the topic of this, the question of elections. For organizations like Syriza and Podemos, elections represent the primary field of struggle, if not the only one. Podemos, one of Iglesias' deputies, one of Podemos' central leaders, once described Podemos as a war machine for winning elections. That was the concept of the party. That was actually part of the justification for why it needed this rigid, undemocratic structure, because the whole party should only exist to win elections. And for the FIT, it's exactly the opposite. That elections do play a big role in what the FIT does, but elections are totally subordinate to the struggles, and that's part of the reason why, as well, the emphasis on the principle of rotation as well. That representatives The FIT are not supposed to be eternal leaders, but you know, are after a time in parliament, don't get sucked into this parliamentary machine, but switch out and go back onto the streets. Yeah, so I think that's why the FIT represents such an interesting example and something that the U.S. left could learn from as well. You know, what possibilities exist for revolutionaries to unite as revolutionaries and develop some common practice.
Thanks, Vladek. You want to add anything?
I would like to open up, so you have something to add for discussion.
Yeah.
Hear from you guys.
I'd like to add only something that it's related to the situation in the U.S. now, and so the way that the left front, the PTS, came through all these years was not something smooth or automatic. There were lots of pressures to support the lesser evil, for example, or to side with the opposition, regardless of the program of the opposition. So it was a road that we had to follow very carefully, and there were many, as I said before, there was a lot of pressure from popular movements, social movements, different center-left organizations that were totally co-opted and dissolved themselves into the Kirchnerist movement. And at the same time, for example, in 2008, there was this huge struggle between the government on the one side, trying to pass high tax on grain exports, and on the other side, the agribusiness bourgeoisie and farmers who were opposing it and were leading roadblocks, and really they put the struggle on the top mainstream media, and it was something that crossed all the country, and everyone was either siding with the agribusiness national bourgeoisie or with the government, who was holding this mask of progressive because they were taxing the rich, and they were taxing the rich to advance more of their own agenda, which was co-opting social movements. It was benefiting their own businessmen who were aligned with them. So it was a turning point, and many of the nationalist left sided with the agribusiness, for example, and they were on the roadblocks with people who own thousands of acres of land. You know, that was really impressive, and it was, I think it was the beginning of a long decrease of the popularity of some of these left forces. But the PTS, I cannot say the FIT, because Izquierda Socialista sided with the it was not the FIT, the left front was not formed at that point. But the PTS took a stance against both sides. They were both bourgeois sides, and we were against the agribusiness and against the government, who was trying to just gain some more caja, we say, budget for the national government to further their own agenda. And the same thing happened with the latest elections. There was a runoff between Macri and Scioli, because none of them won enough votes to be president at the first general election. So there was a runoff, and we campaigned very strongly for a blank vote. And many people were saying, hey, but Scioli is part of the Victory Front, is Kirchnerist. Yeah, of course, Scioli is disgusting. Everyone considered that Scioli had advanced the most regressive and reactionary policies in the province of Buenos Aires in the previous 2 terms, even though he was within the Peronist and the Kirchnerist front, the Victory Front. But we said, no, we are campaigning for the blank vote, because there are 2 bourgeois political parties, 2 bourgeois forces, and none of them represents the workers. And we took a lot of criticism from the populist left, from center-left organizations for that. And two months after Macri took office, many of the congressmen, Kirchnerist congressmen, are giving their vote to pass bills for austerity policies, for layoffs. Without that support, Macri could not go further with those policies. As caucus in Congress, they don't have the strength to pass those bills. They need the support of the Kirchnerists, and the Kirchnerists are giving them the support. So that proves how correct was the position to say none of them represents us. None of them represents the working class. The same with the Kirchnerist governors in the south, Santa Cruz and Tierra del Fuego. They're passing the same austerity policies as Macri. They're laying off state employees. They're cracking down the protests, the same as the Macri's government. So that I think that is an important stance that any anti-capitalist worker party or coalition front has to take, and this is, I think this is totally relevant for the electoral scenario here in the U.S. now, when many of the left is siding with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is running on the Democratic ticket, or they are saying we support Bernie Sanders, but we are against of him running on the Democratic ticket, and not criticizing the foreign policy, which is that he's not even a socialist. He's advancing the Nordic model of social democracy. So those are the positions in which, far from weakening the left, far from weakening a strong position, they are strengthening the left, and they're strengthening our politics as giving it blunt to the working class and putting forward a clear program that can go beyond capitalism. I think I'm done. If anyone wants to add anything, or if not, we open for questions, Q&A. Great. Huh? Yeah, you gonna go down?
Sure. What's your Monica? And I'll take maybe 4 names. Chris, and Pete, and Kim. And what's your name? Ben. We'll start
There's
with
one. Oh, well, you can write all of them.
Mia and hey, Mike. Okay, Monica.
Yeah, I'm with the Spartans Vegan with the Spectacle from Mexico. I find it very important to highlight that the road to revolution cannot be 2030. I mean, one clear example of the contradiction between the so-called revolutionary program of the Frente de Izquierda de los Trabajadores are these ads on TV that you're very proud about, which mention nothing about, real ways to carry the struggle through working class organizations. And another example are your blog comments, which you raise no criticism on. So let me give the audience some examples of review on the Izquierda Socialista and Partido Obrero. Partido Obrero supported Evo Morales in Bolivia. So that's a clear capitalist politician that, just as you were saying, yesterday Syriza was the darling of the left. Evo Morales, Hugo Chavez, these were the darlings of the Latin American left. So, one of your blog partners was for that. Izquierda Socialista is so grotesque as to be in support of Cuban counter-revolutionary. They advocate private property coming back to Cuba. So that's a clear example of, just rotten politics in the interest of running for these presidential posts. I'm not going to go very long into one issue that I think shows the nature of trying to portray, police cops as part of the workers' movement, which was the position of both Izquierda Socialista and PO when the motines policíacos in 2013. Your position, the partido, the PTS, PTS, is for desmantelamiento de las fuerzas represivas del Estado. So to try to call for the dismantling, even though you have a difference with PO and Izquierda Socialista, to call for the dismantling do that? How is that going to happen? It's against reformist politics. Lastly, Peronismo. Yes, it's a historical obstacle. Where was that in your political propaganda, in your manifesto, a break with Peronism? Nunca. Like, that was really never the case. So we oppose running for executive office posts. We think that the true lessons are in the October Revolution of 1917, and that the only way forward is to have a clear program that opposes, for example, in the US, Bernie Sanders. I have a question for the panelists. Since you are now left voice in the US, what is your program for Black liberation? How to move forward from these, struggles? I would like to hear that. We are for actually a Leninist vanguard party that breaks with the tradition of this called, unity of the left that you're advocating, bringing those traditions from elections to the United States. How could the left unite in this country where there's a tradition of, trying to reform the system where, blacks are oppressed and they have really been left as some kind of other group in society? We think that there's a strategic need to be clear on this programmatic question, and I would like to ask that question to the people speaking in the panel. And finally, I don't know if you want to say something about your break with Morenismo. I'll wrap it up here. And how did you defend today the remaining reform worker states? And what is your perspective on that question?
Thank you. Is it okay to take 3 questions? Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, we would ask you to keep it short so that you don't.
And as well as comments. No.
Sure.
Thank you.
My questions are more about sort of the objective situation of the working class. Like, what is the industry in extraction today? In Argentina, what are the actual struggles on the ground? You referenced like some applications and stuff, but I'd like more detail about what the actual struggles that your comrades are involved in on the ground in the workplaces, advance and stuff like that. And that's the main thing I wanted, the additional information.
Thanks.
And Pete?
I have a question for Juan. In Argentina, I was there in '85. I did a survey of the working class, 110 institutes. And except for the teachers, the bancarios, the telefonistas, the laborers, the front of the Peronist movement, they were unequivocally opposed to the left. And this began, as you said, with Perón in '45. I wonder what strategy you can use to penetrate the factories and offices to gain the support of the workers who you represent and who should support you, but they haven't. And this frustrates me. And so over the years, I've become a left reformist because I want to see something happen in my lifetime. And I'm really tired of the extreme left and absence of victories. And Kirchner is the second part. Kirchner, his government pushed nationalization of YPF, nationalization of aerolinias, nationalization of water, of gas. Did all those things. And the only thing I see that they didn't do that the left would support is nationalization of foreign trade, nationalization of the banks, and abortion. So where do you fit in? I know your criticism of Kirchner is very powerful, but they've done a lot. The social welfare programs that you were debunking before. This is the reality. Workers live not just by ideology, but on the body.
Of course. Okay. Okay. Huh? You want to start? I can fill in. So Monica, thanks for your many questions. It looks like you've read a lot of our stuff, and I'm glad that there's people interested in our movement, and I'll try to answer those questions that can fit in a few minutes. Some of them are to elaborate and to discuss at any moment. I would say one of the main things is the differences that we have with Partido Obrero and Izquierda Socialista. We are totally aware of those differences. We don't conceal those differences, and we denounce them every time that is appropriate, that we can. And there is an ongoing debate between our presses, and it's open. And I think it's even criticized by many in Argentina. Like, hey, you're in the front, you cannot be so harsh in your criticism to each other. And we defend that method because that's the way that we should. We are going to win more workers to the positions that we think are correct, the way that the left and workers' fronts can go forward. And we are totally, we have denounced many times. I know you read Spanish, so you can check La Izquierda Diario, La Verdad Obrera. We've denounced many times Izquierda Socialista and PO's position on police, of course. I said a few minutes ago myself that the position that Izquierda Socialista took towards the struggle between the Kirchner government and the agribusiness was wrong, and we denounced it many times. And the position towards the pink tide governments, the post-neoliberal governments in Latin America was a very important thing that we put forward as a deal breaker. The platform, our electoral platform says we are against this type of reformist governments that are the tour government. They are building on popular movement to give just a relief and remain within the limits of capitalist society and not giving any solution. And we see the results now. We see Maduro strengthening the presence of the military in all the neighborhoods now, declaring state of emergency, militarizing the settlements, the poor neighborhoods, because there's lack of food, there's lootings. There's no lootings, but there's a high risk of lootings, and that's where the reformist post-neoliberal governments have led. And there was a very important discussion before the 2015 elections about whether to include in the left and workers' front populist left groups that supported these governments, because PO supported Evo Morales, but then went back and said, no, we don't support it, reformist is not our program. And the platform of the left front is explicitly against that. Izquierda Socialista and Partido Obrero were putting forward and this is very interesting also as an experience, they were putting forward they wanted to include these forces, even when they still supported Chavismo in Venezuela, they still supported Evo Morales, and we said we could include these forces, but as long as they have an agreement with our program, and they explicitly say we are against these governments are not a solution for the working class. These governments are just managing a capitalist bourgeois government. If those things, if those positions are clear, we can make an agreement on principle terms. And that was the reason why they were not included, because they didn't. And we were harshly critical. The PTS was sectarian, was horrible, because we were defending the principles and the platform of the Left and Workers' Front. Of course, we cannot translate the experience of Argentina to the US. It's a totally different situation, totally different countries, an imperialist country. The electoral system here is much more rigged than the electoral system in Argentina. There are many differences. So that was not, if we came out or I came out like that, that was not yeah. And the fight against Peronism is throughout. You want to talk about that?
I wanted to suggest we got a lot of other questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To move on. Yeah. Working class struggles. Did you want to respond to any of? So working class struggles. I may say that one of the we are in many different struggles now. Like there's a campaign of sacked workers in the port of Ensenada near La Plata. Over 100 workers were laid off. This is huge. The teachers are negotiating the what is called paritarias, the bargaining process with the government, and there has been, I think, 5 or 6 weeks of continuous mobilizations, strikes every week. There's state employees fighting against layoffs. When Macri took office, they laid off in Buenos Aires and national government over 2,000 workers. Only in the Senate, over 1,000 workers. In La Plata, 1,000 and plus workers. So state employees is very. It's, I would say, the state as an employer is spearheading the layoffs and the cuts, and they are not still so widespread in the private industry. In the past couple of years, we've been very involved in the in struggles in northern area of Buenos Aires, in this industrial area. The Madigraf takeover of the factory was maybe the most nationwide visible struggle, when the Donnelly, who was the boss, the company, decided to close the plant. The workers, what I was telling, took over the plant and started running it. There's auto part plants like Lear. It was a huge struggle, over 300 days of strike, roadblocks, campment in front of the factory, many times repressed by the gendarmerie, roadblocks. It was really huge. Those are just some of them. Yeah.
Recently, a few weeks ago, there was elections in the tire workers union, in the independent tire workers union. It's a national union, and the tire. It was the first time an independent, a radical left workers slate won the elections after maybe a decade and a half, 16 years of the same union bureaucracy having control of the union. And my understanding is that's the first and only national union with the independent left, now independent left leadership. And that's together different left forces and parties and independents are in that slate.
Juan, could you please address my...
The Kirchner, yeah. The policies that the Kirchner put in place were progressive policies, especially if you put them in comparison with the previous neoliberal decade. This has to be acknowledged not only as progressive and favorable policies for the working class and for the poor, but also as a conquest of the popular forces. Let's remember that Kirchner took office after 2001, and they took office with a very small percentage of the vote. It is not like you can say it's conspiratorial or it's too far-fetched to think they were not doing these things out of goodwill. They're only. But if you look at the historical experience and you go, you follow the Kirchner experience, the Kirchners in government, not only the first 4 or 5 years where many progressive policies were implemented, but when the crisis started to strike, they were the ones who started to crack down protests. They were the ones who started cutting off the budget, laying off people. They are the ones who are actually now implementing the austerity policies. And there is a reason why they lost elections. There is a reason why they now don't have anymore the popular vote. How can we explain that if the Kirchner are such a progressive government and such a progressive force? It's clearly because at some point where there was there was not such a huge economic bonanza that could allow to co-opt social good movements, to give widespread conditional cash transfers. At this point, they were the ones who needed now to bring back to order, to repress protests, to control the working class, and to put a hold to all those expectations that were growing in this past few years. Well, when the unemployment fell, the workers started to experience that if they were laid off in a factory, they were going to be hired in another one, and so that was a main change in the mindset of the workers, and they were starting to ask for more and ask for more, and that was when Manigraf Donnelly shut down the plant. And what did the Kirchner do? They went and repressed. And what did the Kirchner do when Lear laid off all the militant rank and file workers who were at the head of the shop floor committee? They laid off over 50 workers who were doing militant work. They were the shop floor stewards. And what did the Kirchner did? They sent the gendarmerie to repress them when they were in this encampment. I was there. They throw me bullet. How do you say?
Rubber bullets.
Rubber bullets, and they gassed us, and they threw us pepper spray. So that's the Kirchner's government too. It's not only the partial nationalization of YPF, because it was not even 100%. It was 51% with 49% of private investors. And also they did that, and they also gave the franchise to Chevron in Neuquén to exploit the biggest oil resource to do fracking with. We know what fracking is. Everyone here knows what fracking is. And they just give a blank check to Chevron to exploit that resource in Neuquén, the biggest resource in Argentina. So that's the kind of policies that the Kirchner does. Having a popular face, a popular discourse, popular speech, but at the same time cracking down, giving the resources to the international companies, and having that's part of how they took office and how their popularity finally waned.
The Frente Victoria just passed.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Frente
Sorry,
Victoria
Pete. We really only have 10 minutes,
a bill
so.
to have a moratorium on unemployment for 180 days, and it was supported by 5 trade union movements, 2 of them progressive, CTA. I mean, they're still alive and fighting for social change.
They're still reformists. Yep.
Okay. I think Kim is next, and after Ben.
Thank you for your presentation, guys. It was really cool. I guess my question is more about so how do you avoid? That's one of my concerns. Is like, how do you avoid when you go into electoral politics? How do you avoid becoming a savior for people and not? And like, how do you continue to perpetuate the engagement of the working class? You know, a lot of the ads were great, by the way, and they said, through the struggle and through the vote, we will continue this. So for me, it's like it's so much more about the struggle in a way, right? Because it's important that people don't feel the same way they feel about all these clowns who are supposed to represent us. We vote for you, and then you do everything that we want you to do for us. You know, so I guess I imagine that it already does work in workplaces, so that's an established thing. But through this electoral process,
in the Frente de Izquierda, how is that still something that's very pushed forward in every speech, in every conversation? You know, it's not us who's going to do the work, it's really you guys who are going to be doing the work. That's my concern, and I think that a lot of people know that the class consciousness, especially here in the United States, like at a really low level, so people don't feel empowered. So how do we not fall into that pattern of like, don't worry about it, we got you, you know, and then people don't feel like they have that potential, which we really want, you know, we really want those people to feel always strength and power.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll also hear from Ben and Miguel. As well.
I'll be quick because I know we don't have much time. I do have a couple comments and a question. The question is, I think, Juan, I think you're saying that there's differences with the PO or with other fund partner over the question of the police. And I guess the question is, how do the elected officials of the workers in left front vote on issues like, you know, budgets, if they're facing an austerity budget, or if there's a question of, you know, funding the police, or if there's a question of just the nuts and bolts of, you know, administering the state. I don't share this righteous, you know, criticism of running for electoral office, but I do think it's an important question of how you relate to the bourgeois state and also particularly austerity. That's the question. The comment is basically, I think it's, I thank you guys for the presentation. I think this is a very important topic, and you know, I just learned about the feat recently. I think it's encouraging. I think it's a very important point of reference for workers and press people in the U.S. Who, you know, we're all, you know, the left has been wrapped up with the question of, you know, the Bernie Sanders or the Green Party. You know, and I think the feat and, you know, and there are other historical examples as well, of course, but, you know, we're talking about something that goes beyond the framework of, you know, explicitly pro-bourgeois politics, and we're talking about something that's explicitly anti-capitalist. And I think that's, you know, a key difference from not only, you know, Sanders, who's an open, you know, Democrat and whatnot, but the Green Party too, and sort of some of the left alternatives that are opposed in this country that are not real alternatives, that don't actually challenge, you know, capitalism. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You talk about like a fighting for workers' government and socialism and all these things, but yet you don't raise the example where it happened in real life, which is the Russian Revolution. And the kind of work that the Bolsheviks did is completely contrasted to what the Beat has done in history, as far as like the Bolsheviks fought for revolutionary things that was able to you know, help the working class ultimately, you know, be stronger against the bourgeoisie, and with the Bolsheviks and its leadership to overthrow it. Now, you supported the junta in the Falklands War, and they actually lost that war, and that was a good thing. That led to the collapse of the junta. But you know, you guys, the PTS, Moreno's movement at the time, supported that, and even to this day, on the 30th anniversary, we still supported that. As far as criticizing your bloc partners, you know, the criticism of them supporting the PO and the Izquierda Socialista supporting the cop strikes. You said it was syndicalismo, which it goes, you know, much deeper than that. It has nothing to do with syndicalism. They're the armed force of the state, and which needs to be smashed by the working class by you know, replacing it with its own state. So, you know, I say look to the example of the Bolshevik party of the Russian Revolution, and that's you know, what the Spartacist League tries to instill in the working class. And one more comment. You say break with the Democratic Party, and that's not just a question of how left or how socialist sounding Bernie Sanders is.
Thank you. Can we start with those? And after that, it's Michael and Leo. And I'm sorry. Skip? Oh, okay. Then Leo, please go ahead since you're.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a brief also comment. I think what Peter brought up is a really important question about the influence that Peronism has in the working class movement. But I think it's a little bit unfair to say that even though it's true that historically the working class has been greatly influenced by Peronism, it's a little bit unfair say that this influence didn't have breaking points throughout the history of Peronism. Certainly, the Peronist governments were not the same the first, the second stage, or the third stage, which was even repressive. And we have to remember that in '75 there was a big general strike, a spontaneous general strike by the working class, which was the first breaking point in Peronism, that led to the bourgeoisie having to resort to the military coup to end that movement. So nowadays, the 80s were 10 years of the Peronists were not in power. The 90s, the Peronists came back to power and with a neoliberal agenda. The 2001 crisis put all the political crises political parties in crisis, even the Peronists, to the point that they had to, as one explained, resort to very leftist, even demands. The Kirchner-backed used to say, to the left of us is the wall, because there was nothing left of the Kirchner, supposedly, because truly they had co-opted many of the organizations. But one of the main handicaps of the Kirchner government and the Peronist movement is the working class itself, because even though the working class, the leadership, and the bureaucrats are all Peronists, the new workers, the young workers, are not heavily influenced by the Peronists anymore. And this is the most dynamic sector of the working class that has been reflected in all the syndicalism de base that has been taking shape. And it's even reflected by international media that they see that the growth of the activism in the working class sector is being done by the petistas. It's being growing in all the comisiones internas and so on, in dozens and dozens of factories. The Kirchner-backs don't have one organization in the working class. They don't control one factory. They tried to organize, but they failed. So the Peronists have a big crisis in the working class because the new generation is not heavily influenced by the Peronists, the young people. There's a breakthrough. That's what I wanted to add to this discussion. And to the comments that you're making about the Bolshevik Revolution, the Fed is the #1 defender of the Bolshevik Revolution. But to say that let me finish. To say that the Fed is one of the examples of the Bolsheviks is like the Bolsheviks were fighting against the Tsars. There was no parliament. How would you compare the two? I think it's a little bit unfair to say compare it.
Yeah,
go ahead. I wasn't late. I'm sorry. I lived far away. But my last question, I agree in part with that. But my last one question that I have: where do we go now in Argentina? What is going to happen?
You wanted to
Yeah, I think I can cover at least some of those questions. Kim, what you asked, I think, was really important. The question of all the pressures of parliamentarianism. I think I said in my introduction as well. How do you avoid getting sucked into this machine? And it's but fortunately, the FIDE is not the first experience of this. There's a whole long tradition of Marxist revolutionary interventions in parliament, both positive and, well, even more negative experiences that we can learn from. And at the end of the day, the only way I think to resist this pressure is a constant political battle in order to keep our representatives from getting sucked into the swamp of bourgeois parliamentarianism. So, we've had experiences ourselves. I remember a few years ago there was a discussion where the PTS was involved in a very profound election struggle. The very first time that the FIDE was able to get in parliament, and then recognizing that just across the Andes, just across the border in Chile, was a massive general strike movement developing, and the PTS comrades and leadership realizing that there had been a period of weeks where they had not really been following the class struggle in Chile as closely as they should, due to the pressures of election campaigning. And it's just this process of constant self-criticism, I think, that can save one from these pressures. And specifically also the idea that parliamentarians, all these organizational restrictions we place on them, that they only serve for a limited amount of time, that they rotate out of parliament, that they only get a worker's wage, that's an important thing, as well as important symbolic, for example, Nicolas del Caño is a representative from the province of Mendoza. His refusal to even meet with the other deputies from the province. So his refusal to participate in the parliamentary delegation from the province, because those are all deputies of the capitalists. And the last thing is also the idea of the parliamentarians aren't autonomous. They're not representing themselves in parliament. That they're always that they represent the views of the party as a whole. These are all things that we didn't think of ourselves. These are things that developed by the Communist International in the 1920s to try to avoid social democratic experiences, things like that. And so, just briefly about Ben. So part of one of the other traditions we represent is the refusal to give any support to a bourgeois government, to never vote for its budgets in any circumstance, and that is a consensus among all the parties of the Frente. We never support any budget or any measures of the government, but at the same time, the differences in the FIT also occasionally find a parliamentary expression, that the FIT is actually represented in parliament as different parliamentary factions. And in certain questions, there also have been differences within parliament. So I think we're getting kicked out now. But thank you so much for your questions.
Yeah.
And
Check out some of our stickers. We got some
stickers
in our unions.